Supervisor Mary Rose Wilcox has been a friend of the coalition for years. She was there when the coalition was founded in 2006, and I just want to welcome her and thank her for being here and allowing us to be here.
Thank you, Daniel, and congratulations to Somos for hosting this. I just wanted to say welcome to Maricopa County's Supervisors Auditorium. We've had a lot of immigration talks here, believe me. We've had a lot of protests. We've had discussions on immigration, but I would like you to know that this is your home. You're taxpayers, you pay it, and anytime you want to use it, you're welcome. I'm very, very interested in hearing the dialogue tonight. I recently came back from Washington, and everybody is so confused on what is going to be the standard for border security. Everybody is talking about we must have it first in order to move forward with immigration reform, but nobody wants to define what is it we must have. I know for one, I do not think a committee put together that has John Brewer representing us would be very good. But you know, we've yet to see what's going to happen. But with that, I'm going to turn it back to Daniel and just like to say, I hope tonight we get some clear thoughts, and all of you please advocate for immigration reform. The one thing when I was back in DC, I heard from Senator Flake and Senator McCain, we need to hear from everybody. And believe me, the left needs to weigh in because the right is. And those of you who haven't written letters or haven't gotten groups to write letters, please do so because it's becoming very, very important with the right putting extreme pressure on. So with that, I see Lisa de la Vara here, who represents Congressman Pastor, a very, very strong supporter of immigration reform. So thank you, and let's all get to the business of border security. And we have fine panelists. I'd like to say Terry Goddard has worked many, many years with AGs across the border states. So everything that we hear tonight, hopefully, it'll frame where we should go with border security.
Great. Now, Supervisor Wilcox already mentioned that we have some individuals here who I would like to thank for being here. Among them are our committee for the event, Tal Anfried, Liana Rowe, and Colin Marston, who is not here today but helped put this panel together. I also want to acknowledge the coalition not only is interested in educating our member organizations and individuals about policy issues, but also reaching out to all congressional offices that are working on this issue. If immigration reform, or it will pass, but when immigration reform passes and border policy is left up to border states, governors, and community organizations, it's important to offer this kind of educational opportunities. So I want to thank, as already has been mentioned, Elisa de la Vara, who's here from Congressman Pastor's office. We're also going to have Jose Miranda from Congressman Grijalva's office, and we have Erika Andiola from Congresswoman Cinema's office. So thank you so much for being here and for the border organizations, including the Border Action Network, who are present with us today. With that, let me begin with the panel. We're going to go one by one. Each of them has up to 20 minutes to present. It may be 10, it may be 20, it may be 25, depending on how much information they want to offer us. But they're welcome. I do want to say we have some notes that are going to be handed out, some note cards. If you have any questions, since it's a smaller turnout, we may be able to manage if you just want to stand up and say your question. But if you do want to write it down for any reason, you will have that available to you. So our first presenter is Dr. Jaime R. Aguila. Serves an assistant professor of history in the School of Letters and Science at Arizona State University. He began at ASU in the fall of 2007 after teaching for 8 years at the University of Texas of the Permian Basin in Odessa, Texas. He offers courses in the Mexican-U.S. border, Mexican-U.S. relations, and immigration public policy. Jaime's scholarship analyzes the evolution of Mexican immigration public policy and Mexican-U.S. relations. He has held fellowships at the National Autonomous University of Mexico and the U.S. Library of Congress. He has publications in the Diplomatic History, the Journal of American Ethnic History, the Voices of Mexico magazine, and in various edited collections. He is currently completing a book-length manuscript titled Forging Exterior Mexico, Mexican-American Relations. Jaime is native of Fresno, California, and a former farm worker, and also, like myself, the son of a former, or in my case, currently undocumented immigrant. Thank you so much, Jaime.
Hello. Well, I'd like to begin by telling you what I'm not going to do. I'm not here to change your minds, and I'm not here to tell you the truth.
Just like everybody else.
This isn't going to admit it. But I am here to engage you purposely and productively in a conversation about the topics at hand. As soon as I get my dog and pony show here going. And here, my students love these, and these are all, I have copyright permission to use those if there's any lawyers here. Here's an example of part of the problem, or part of the issue that takes place with the role of the Mexican laborer, the bracero, in the United States. On the one hand, you have the worker, the bracero, who's been, the same Mexican bracero has been coming here, and bracero has been coming here for over 120 years. They've consistently been here, coming, contributing to the economy, acting as consumers, and everything that's expected of a citizen, of a neighbor within the United States. But on the other hand, they've also been persecuted, marginalized, apathetically, purposely, and I myself have served in both of those. My parents, I was a farm worker, my parents were farm workers. I've also been in INS detention cells when I was 10 years old. I've also been pulled over more or less right after SB 1070 in my Prius at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And ironically, the first time I was pulled over, I was joking with my students. I said, those laws are for you kids who are out there at 5 in the morning, coming home from whatever you do at 3 in the morning like I used to. Sure enough, the next day I'm coming home from work in Gilbert, Arizona, and I was told that I had a broken tail light. Of the 4 times I was pulled over, 3 times was for a broken tail light, and 3 times took it to the Toyota dealership because they have a good job and I can afford to go to the dealer. I mean, there's nothing wrong with your car. They all function well. So when I hear that we're only following the laws here in Arizona, that it follows, we're not breaking in laws, we have classes against racial profiling, as a Toyota owner, I'm offended. Owning my Prius. So, anyway, and part of the problem that creates misunderstanding and failure to engage someone who might oppose what you think is the oversimplification of what's going on today. And for example, illegal is illegal, right? That is such a powerful message when you're trying to win an argument or maybe win a political campaign. But again, what does it really mean? And does it fit within a productive conversation to produce productive, effective public policy that improves or continues to support the American dream, or the reason why we come to this country, or for example, the reason why my parents came to this country. But also, just as powerful is Americans take jobs that Americans don't want. That also it simplifies this process because it assumes that some Americans are lazy and don't want to take certain jobs, which may or may not be true. But certainly it prevents, again, a rational discussion. How do you discuss either one of these points of view constructively? And another thing I tell my students frequently, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be afraid of what's from all the misinformation of the situation that's going on. It's how you act on those feelings that really can lead to problems or can be used constructively. Here's one of the most important points that I teach my students frequently is that immigration is rarely the fundamental problem from this discussion. But what immigration does do, in immigration discussions, they reveal and contextualize other more pressing concerns in our case, in American society. And here are some examples of different concerns: drug trafficking, migrations, crime, taxpayer costs, the education system, terrorism, the U.S. Constitution, Second Amendment rights, 14th Amendment, which are both relevant to the discussions we're having today, and too many Mexicans. And I put that on there. 2 weeks ago, I was giving a lecture at ASU West, and one of my students, essentially in this class, stood up and told me, "Dr. Aguilar, Mexicans make a mockery of the Constitution. They're here to steal our jobs, and they're here to have babies." I said, "Well, most of us are Catholic. However, the birth rates among Hispanic women is now either at or below American Caucasian women or Asian. So the whole babies thing has dropped tremendously, especially Hispanic, Latino women here in the United States and in Mexico. The birth rates have dropped down considerably. And by the way, Mexican society is becoming a lot older. So with the way the economy is going, there's not going to be as much excess labor the next few years, so what's going to be a concern is where we're going to get that labor in the future, because it's not necessarily going to come from Mexico. Again, I'm not here to tell you the truth, you have to contextualize that to contribute to a rational discussion. And here's another very powerful image. When they jumped the fence, they broke the law, right? I'm going to show you later on, not checking in at the border is a civil penalty. It can be anywhere from $50 to $250 fine. Right? Doesn't necessarily depend on deportation. I don't know if there's a birther complaint against President Obama. It could be, but here's again oversimplifies the discussion, but it sends a very powerful message. Here we have anchor babies, or I like to call them U.S. citizens. And again, another powerful ad. And then here we have, the 14th Amendment is under attack. This is not what President Lincoln meant when he passed the 14th Amendment within the context of freeing the slaves, who are forced immigrants, by the way, right? Our African slaves, African American brothers and sisters. And then so here is, this is a good one because it follows up to this. This report just came out in March, just a couple weeks ago. And what it says is that this study has proven, has documented, 2.2% of all arms sold in the United States end up illegally in Mexico, end up in the hands of narcos. This is just what can be proven, by the way. All right? And that leads to about $1.27 million in profit for someone. And the report's recommendation is that all guns bought at the border, within Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, etc., California, is that they should be paid for with a check or with a credit card so that you can document who's making these purchases. Now, that immediately is going to lead into a debate over the Second Amendment, right? The constitutionality of contemporary public policy. So is immigration the issue? Is the Second Amendment the issue? Right? Or is the use and misuse of the Constitution? And the Constitution, as far as being misused, is probably second only to the Bible in terms of misinterpretation, exploitation, to win an argument. And here's some examples of more pressing issues that are, without a doubt, immigration is related to. Public education system is under every child left behind, no child left behind, depending on how you want to interpret that. There are over 19 million native-born adults 25 years or over who do not have a high school education. There are 1.2 million native-born adults 25 years or over who have no education at all. This is based on the U.S. Census. Which, for me, 1.2 million, we have a nation of 300 million, but it might not sound like very much, but I can't fathom that. Thankfully, I didn't live in that situation. I can feel a tremendous amount of pain for those people. And then, so now what's the issue? Is the immigrant responsible for that? Certainly, there's a relationship there, but 19 million don't have a high school education. And those with lacking of education or even a GED, those are the people, that is the sector of our society that's most likely to be negatively impacted by competition by undocumented labor. Unstable economy, I don't know of any undocumented immigrants who were investment bankers or lending money for an unregulated real estate market. These are the unemployment rates for Arizona. It is January 2013. For the national, it is March 8th. And there's maybe more closer relationship there, but I'll discuss some of the differences later on in my presentation. Obviously, states' rights is the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, Second Amendment. Who should be able to, where does the power, where does sovereignty based on the Constitution, the state level, at the county level, at the city level, in my neighborhood, your neighborhood. And then addiction. There is maybe the most important in terms of the point I'm trying to make, and I'm devoting 2 more slides to it to demonstrate that. In 2005, actually I should say 2006 drug report said that in 2005, $13.8 billion in profits went to Mexican drug cartels. 8.5 billion, or 61%, came from Mexican marijuana sales, marijuana grown in Mexico. In 2005, Americans spent $65 billion on illegal drugs. 8.1% of the entire U.S. population, 12 and over, had tried drugs, illicit drugs. Now, by the way, that's not alcohol, prescription drugs, abuse, these these new drugs that the kids are taking that are legal or illegal, right? That we hear about it, and then a month later, the legislature passes a law against it, chasing, dog chasing its tail to an extent. And then domestic production of marijuana in California, Kentucky, and Texas accounts for 1/2 of all U.S. consumption. So if you want, one way to hit the narcos is to buy American. To buy more American drugs, and the narcos have less money. Now, you laugh, but to an extent, from a capitalistic standpoint, it makes as much sense as Bill is spending $5 billion on a wall that never gets built. Now, this is a 2010, a study that came out last year about drug use in 2010. Illegal drug use continues to rise. 22.6 million Americans, or 8.9% of the adult population 18 or over, have consumed some type of illegal drug. 17.4 million Americans were using marijuana compared to 14.4 in 2007. And then the younger generation, the demographic that everybody wants to sell product to, all the commercials are meant for 18 to 25 demographic, are using more drugs than the previous generation. So what's the problem? Is the problem the Mexican undocumented immigrant, or the Central American, or the Irish undocumented immigrant? Are they at the core of the issue, or are there other issues afoot? And how would we stop that? My guess, one solution would be to invest in social service programs, hire more social workers, more counselors, more teachers, jobs that cannot be outsourced, to contribute to that. Right? One prison guard in California, and they have a powerful union. One prison guard in California earns the salary of 3 elementary school teachers. Pay now, pay more later. And here's an article in the New York Times, came out in December 2012. I had to Google how to do hectares to acres, but anyway. 48,185 acres in Mexico are devoted to poppy cultivation. So there you see some statistics about how the Mexican economy is being affected by our addiction in this country. The scariest stat is the one in bold. $177.26 is the retail price of 1 gram of pure cocaine for a typical, from a typical local pusher, and that's a quote, typical local pusher. 70% cheaper than it was 30 years ago. So pure cocaine, the price has gone down. How do you compete against that? You build a fence, more border guards, have 18,000 plus border agents on the border. Will that stop the addiction problem in the United States? Here, I'm going to skip these. These define what an undocumented immigrant is, an alien, illegal alien. We have all these terms. The Immigration Nationality Act, if you Google Immigration Nationality Act, you can look up how the United States government, in terms of citizenship, in terms of border crossers, will define that. I think that's a pretty consistent, we need a pretty consistent definition in order to further the discussion on how to deal with the current context that we're in. Instead of giving you the 11.2 million undocumented people in the United States, here's a 2010 map showing you where the population resides based on this graphic. And then we have to secure the border. According to Governor Brewer's book, Scorpions for Breakfast, their undocumented border crossers is 1,000 a day. Jim Gilchrist, one of the founders of the Minutemen, and these are unsighted sources, by the way. That's my job as an academic, to kill my students. Where are your sources? According to Jim Gilchrist, when he wrote his book, The Minutemen, there are 30 million undocumented immigrants in the United States in 2006. I'm sorry I laughed at numbers. It's a very funny number. 30 million, and he was talking about putting up with that 30,000 immigrants a day crossing into the border. Anyway, and here are definitions of what the Border Patrol seeks. This is the current definition of what the border means to do as far as securing the border. And the phrase is operational control. And that's a very good term. But if you want to go beyond that, I've gone through the various congressional hearings of what operational control of the border means. And it depends on essentially the political, what's going on nationally and statewide. The last one, if you notice the last one, reduce crime in border communities and consequently improve the quality of life and economic vitality of the region, of regions. San Diego and El Paso, over the last 5 years, have been one of the top 6 safest large cities in the United States. San Diego and El Paso. El Paso, I used to live in Texas. Jokingly, Texans call El Paso the capital of Juarez, because Juarez is about 3 times as big. But El Paso is typically 2 or 3, the second or third safest city in the United States in terms of violent crime. San Diego is typically in the top 6 if you look over FBI crime statistics. But there is a border city that is the most violent, the most dangerous city in the United States. Can anyone guess what city is the most dangerous in the United States based on FBI crime statistics? It's a border city. Detroit, Michigan. Those Canadians at Windsor are way out of control. You do something with them. But it's Detroit, the most dangerous city. Border communities are typically some of the safest in the United States. I've been reading a lot of Mark Twain lately, and you have to understand, if you want to understand Latin American literature, especially on the Caribbean, you have to understand Mark Twain and the Empire. By the way, sorry, that's a different class. But here's Mark Twain's famous quote. That's the whole quote, but there are 3 kinds of lies. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. Right? I told you I wasn't going to tell you the truth, so I'm going to give you some statistics. Here is a graph comparing apprehensions to amount of federal money spent on border protection or border protection. And so the greener the triangle, the top graph, which cuts below the aqua, the green, those are border apprehensions, and the aqua is federal government spending. As you can, and then that line coming straight down, that's the beginning of the Great Recession in 2007. So as you can see, border apprehensions or border crossings began to drop a few months before we had the recession. So an argument economists make is levels of apprehensions, levels of undocumented immigration are an indicator, are an economic indicator. And if you look back at the 1980s, if you look back at the Great Depression, a few months before the Great Depression starts in October of 1929, Mexican immigration in the United States started slowing because there were less jobs. So Mexican immigration, and today Mexican and Central American immigration, can be used as indicators determining the health of the economy. So what do we do with that information? Here's some comparing federal spending in 2006, 2009 to 2012, 2013. We're spending a whole lot more money, but apprehensions have dropped, and I'll show you some apprehension numbers in a second. But today there are about 18,400 Border Patrol agents along the Mexican-U.S. border. And by the way, Border Patrol agents, or when the federal government puts money into the Mexican-U.S. border, the same would be true in the Canadian-U.S. border, that can also be viewed as federal stimulus money. Right? So that's important to understand as well. That helps the local economy. Even the Minutemen, when they were here along the border, they have to buy a bottle of water, they have to buy products, they have to stay somewhere. Beer. They have to buy beer, right? They have to buy beer. Otherwise, your Coors, etc., or that one that just says beer. And so that can be seen as stimulus to the economy. It's also, and I would argue to a great extent that Governor Brewer understood that. And that helps our economy, by the way, when you have more federal funding. In that, that creates jobs, service industries. And I'd be happy to provide this PowerPoint for anyone who would like it. So I'm just going to skip over things. Here's some FBI crime statistics. Between 2005 2008, right at the height of the highest levels of Mexican or undocumented immigration here in Arizona, the population grew by about 600,000 people between 2005 2008. The reported violent crimes dropped by nearly 1,500 reported crimes. So you had more people, but you had reported crimes dropping. Reported property crimes also fell by about 287,000 reported crimes. Again, as the population is increasing. Here's a report by the Cato Institute, a libertarian think tank, again to support, the FBI statistics. And essentially, the statistics say the same thing. Violent crime, reported in June 9, 2010 Cato Institute report, demonstrated that violent crime in Arizona in 2008 was its lowest since 1971. Again, people come to the United States not to commit crimes. They come to work. People who come to work and have in their legal status, it's a quasi-legal status, don't want to stick out. They're not going to commit crimes. And then here you have one point I'll highlight. U.S.-born men have an institutionalization rate 10 times higher than foreign-born men. All right, And again, I know Mark Twain's in the back of my mind, but I'm trying to, my job is to an extent to contextualize this information for you. And then crime rates as a result of the push after 2007 in terms of more immigration convictions. Immigration convictions among Hispanic males, Latino males, it used to be that the majority of federal convictions for Hispanic males were drug-related causes. Now it's immigrant-related causes are leading to more federal convictions. And again, if now narcotraficantes, the use of drugs are becoming more and more a bigger threat, immigration apprehensions are going down, meaning less number of immigrants are coming to this country without checking in. Should that be reversed? Now, there's some great source of information. This is from the U.S. Bureau of Transportation. I know it's a lot. Just give you some examples. In 2011, over 40 million pedestrians crossed the Mexican-U.S. border, entry and leaving. There were 61 million personal vehicles crossed the Mexican border, checking in back and forth. Those numbers, this particular slide is important because we forget how important the health of the economy is to our life. I would argue that the health of the economy is the #1 security concern for the United States. If the economy doesn't grow, right, if it doesn't grow at a certain rate, we're in a recession. If it stops growing, we're in a depression. If the economy doesn't grow on unemployment, we don't have money to spend $4.7 billion on a virtual fence. We don't have money to employ the sheriff's office to pull people over, justifiably or not. So the health of the economy is much more important than all other security concerns. And in fact, if you go back and read the philosophers John Locke, Voltaire, Rousseau, the philosophical founders of our United States Constitution, our way of life. The whole process of the Enlightenment, is that government exists to protect private property. That's why government exists, and then it's evolved. Right? We're still waiting for the Greens to receive their benefits or what they deserve. But government initially was created in the Western European model to protect private property. The economy is of the utmost importance. And the current public policy, the current direction we're in public policy is in contradiction to what government should do. We want our private property to be protected. We want a healthy economy. So we actually need those numbers to grow, which puts more pressure on all our border enforcement, customs, ICE, etc. This is, again, the U.S. border of transportation. Every one of those red dots is a spot where some type of product is crossing from Mexico to the United States. It might be people, it might be customs products. But again, to give you, it's kind of a very generic slide, but there's a lot of ways to cross into the border. That's a lot of responsibility. And we want to put, for the health of the economy, we want to put even more pressure on those red dots because we need the economy to continue to grow. I want to finish with Mexico. Remember Secretary of State Clinton, when she first came to office, made a statement that Mexico is a failed state, which totally blew my mind as a Mexican historian, as a Mexican-American. Mexico is the most stable country in Latin America. Given yesterday's massacre in Michoacan, Mexico has not experienced a military dictatorship since 1914. It's the only country in Latin America that has not suffered from military dictatorship. The only nation in Latin America since 1914. It has only had civilian presidents since 1946. And there is percentage of GDP on military spending typically since 2008, less than 0.5%. It spends on. That's going to change, by the way, with the Merida Initiative and all this drug trafficking. The Mexican military is going to will become in the next 5 or 6 years a player in Mexican politics, which is completely 180-degree change from what it was historically over the 20th century. And I don't think that's necessarily going to be a positive. But the push in the United States to fight drug trafficking, to fight terrorism, is going to make the United States military, the Mexican military, more influential. And for comparison, the United States, our GDP is somewhere between 4.4% 4.8% goes to military spending. There's the Merida Initiative and its goals. The Mexican legal system has recently, 2 or 3 years ago, changed from the Napoleonic Code to ours. Prior to this change, the Mexican legal system was you're guilty until proven innocent. But that's changed. Now they have a similar legal system to ours here in the United States. Innocent until proven guilty. If you were convicted of some type of minor crime in Mexico, you might not see a judge, and sure they wouldn't have a lawyer. You'd be convicted by a low-level non-judicial official. And that contributes to this transition that Mexico's going on. And then the Mérida Initiative, we're sending lawyers and judges to go down there and consult on the Mexican members of the Mexican justice system. But that's going to be a long transition. But again, the Mérida Initiative, $1.6 billion so far. It's also, we've freighted helicopters and other military apparatus into the country. Here's Mexico GDP. It's the 12th biggest in the United States as of 2010. But per capita becomes the 85th, so it dropped. But look at the United States. We go from the second, and that's second to the European Union, by the way. But from a nation, obviously ours is the biggest GDP. And we're the 11th per capita, so that's a little disheartening. And it might have dropped. I'm sure it's dropped a little bit since. And what's important is, these are my sources. And my job, what I partly teach my students, is you can't just pull the sources out that help the argument. You have to have overlapping sources. You have to have sources that are those that question the point you're trying to make. And here's a variety of my sources: the Office of the President, the United States Census, Immigration and Citizenship Services, things like Migration Policy Institute, which is a nonpartisan. That and the Pew Hispanic Center, both sides of the argument use. So they're very objective, and they're essentially the standard when you start outside of the census. When you start hearing citations of sources, and so I thought that was as important as anything else. That was the point I was trying to make. So thank you.